Hi everyone. Today we're back with another episode of AI Unfiltered podcast. And today we're bringing you the future of thinking from living neurons to biocomputers with Dr. Evelina Kurtys. Hi, Dr. Evelina, and thank you so much for joining us. My guest here is a neurologist turned entrepreneur and now a strategic advisor and founder as well. She is helping deep tech teams turn complex research into real world breakthroughs with more than 20 peer reviewed publication and years spent in intersection of biology, imaging, and computation. She represents a new wave of European founders reshaping how we think about intelligence, human and artificial alike. So today we'll unpack her journey from Poland's neuroscience labs to cutting the edge of wetware computing and how her work is challenging everything we assume about technology, gender, and consciousness. Evelina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here.
Awesome. So tell us, Evelina, our listeners really want to understand, especially women in tech, who were you before you took on this path, shifting from academic neuroscience to deep tech entrepreneurship?
So I always wanted to be a scientist when I was young. So I went in that direction. I did PhD in the Netherlands in neuroscience in very nice lab. I highly recommend Netherlands for studying. It's a very cool place. And I was very fascinated with science, but I always knew that I want to leave academia at some point, that I don't want to stay there forever. Because I wanted to have broad options available. Because in academia, in my opinion, there is only one way to be successful, is to become professor. And I always believed, and I think I was right, that if you go outside in the real world, let's say, you have many ways to be successful. There are many areas. You can work in the big company, small company, you can do your own stuff. So there is big variety of what you can do and how you can be successful. So I was exploring a lot. Of course, I didn't know a lot about industry. So initially I thought maybe I apply to some big corporation. Maybe that's like everyone is doing. But with trial and errors, talking to people, I discovered the world of startups. I was lucky because at that time I was in London, because my last research activity was in London at King's College. I was a postdoc there for 2 years, and London is perfect place for networking and for exploring, because everything is there, whatever you wish, I think. So I had the chance to learn about startups, about small companies, and I started a first job in London office for 1 year, and then I set up my own company, and I'm enjoying very much. But I think everyone can find his own way. So, it's just a trial error, I believe. So when you leave academia, for sure, everything is different. But yes, by trial and error, you can find something what suits your personality. That's what I believe.
That's amazing. And it's almost like fine-tuning your own process and what works for you in terms of your creativity.
Yes, absolutely.
Great insight. What a great journey. We love to know that, Final Spark's work on living neurons network sounds like completely science fiction to a lot of the folks. What exactly does wetware computing mean in practice?
So in practice, we try to build computers where processor will be built from living neurons. So the same type of neurons like we have in our heads, in our brains, because we know that neurons are 1 million times more energy efficient than digital hardware. So we want to make computers which will consume less energy. So that's the burning problem which we have today with AI, because the energy consumption is increasing exponentially, and people are constantly thinking how to solve it. And there are two possible options. So either alternative energy sources or alternative computing. So we believe in the second option. So we want to make different type of computer which will use less energy.
Very interesting. You mentioned a little bit of the urgency, why it needs to be right now. What do you think the urgent alternative to energy hungry AI models today?
Well, the alternative, which we believe, is based on the living brain, because brain is very efficient and it doesn't use so much energy. So our alternative is computer built from living neurons, where living neurons are processing information. So what we do today, we have prototypes, and we do this by putting neurons, living neurons on electrodes, so that we can send them electrical signals, and we can also measure response from neurons. So this is how we are building the computer of the future.
Super fascinating. And when you think about the human brain as a model, is
Mhm.
your fascination more scientific, philosophical, or ethical?
I think scientific and philosophical, I would say the most. Personally, when I left academia, of course, as a researcher, I was purely focused on biology, on biological processes, which I was measuring in the brain. But as I'm getting older, I'm more interested in philosophy. I think it's a natural tendency of people, maybe, at least some of them, that when you get old, you get interested in philosophy. So yes, I'm interested in general in mind from many perspectives, in psychology, how we behave, because a lot of things which happen in our life is explained by brain. So yes, I think it's very fascinating. And yes, definitely biology, psychology, philosophy of brain is super cool. Very cool topics. Although I'm
And
not an
you
expert, of course, because I did my PhD only in biology, so I'm not expert in philosophy or psychology. Also, not really expert. Yes.
You operate in one of the toughest environments, super competitive neuroscience, engineering, and venture building. How did you find your own belonging within these different, very competitive landscape and also like very heavy with male gender, like a landscape?
So first, I would say I don't think it's so competitive because I think that what we do is so specialized that there are not many people which would fit. So actually, when you are very specialist, you specialize, you find your niche. I don't think it's so much competitive. It's just I follow my own way. So I don't care about what other people are doing, and also not many people maybe are interested in the same things like me. So I always try to, go around and not to compete for some stuff. So that's one thing. Second thing, how you find your way. Yes, definitely trial and error, like in everything. You just have to try, and if you don't try, you never know. We know ourselves as far as we tested, so we cannot. Theoretically, it's hard to predict. So yes, definitely trial and error and see what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy. For me, working in small companies was very helpful because usually they give you more exposure. So you can do maybe 2 jobs at a time and you can see what you prefer. Yes, trial and error, definitely.
That's
And I
awesome.
think there are quite a lot of women in science, I would say. I don't feel so lonely. Maybe depends on which kind of conference you go, but I don't feel very lonely. I think there are many women in the tech also, and this is increasing actually more and more. At least what I've seen. And actually, the first company, it's funny because the first company in which I was working after academia was actually led by women and was very women dominated. So I would say my experience shows the world where women have a lot of impact.
That's really good to hear. And
Mhm.
we want to live in that, like, space where there are more people like us. So,
Yes,
on that
definitely.
note, what
Mhm.
advice do you have for young women scientists who want to commercialize their research, but fear they are not businesses enough or opportunities enough? Like, what would you say, like, to tackle the number one area?
I think networking is very important if you want to commercialize anything. So that's you have to talk to people and learn. There is no this you cannot learn from the books if you want to commercialize technology. So I think talking to people and networking, if someone wants to do this, and you have to also ask yourself if you really enjoy that because that's I think necessary.
How do you translate something as abstract as neuroscience into a go-to-market or funding story for
Mhm.
investors so they can understand in the most like easiest, simple way?
I think, I hope it's understandable what I say, although you can never satisfy everyone. There is always someone who is criticizing you that you're too complex. But I think most of the people with whom I talk, they quite understand. I think the key is that you have to really understand what you do. And if you really understand to the core, to the basics, then you are able to explain this in very basic way so that everyone can understand. So I think that's the key. And always try to be transparent because we also, it's very important for us, I think, because new technologies often they cause some fear. People are afraid of new things which they don't understand. So I think this is fundamental when you work on a new technology, to be very transparent. So that's why, for example, on our website on finalspark.com, there is section live. You can see a live view from our laboratory, so that we try to show people as much as we can, so that they can understand and not be afraid of what we are doing.
Absolutely, find more clarity. In your experience, where do scientists often get stuck when turning research into revenue and strategies into real traction?
I think it's totally different type of work. So I think you have to change. You have to understand that it's different job. The commercial work is totally different than doing research. And it's also similar in some way because you are also experimenting. But yes, what is important? Maybe you don't have to be so much precise and like in the lab. In the lab, you have to be careful, much more careful on the details and very complex. While in the commercial world, you have to simplify everything. And yeah, I think that's maybe important to simplification, because scientists have this tendency to sometimes over complex.
Tell us that you mentioned that AI's energy crisis is one of the biggest issue of our time. How do you see biology offering a solution there?
So we can learn a lot from biology because our brains are very energy efficient, and we can run on one banana for all day. If you would like to do the same with a computer, you would need a small nuclear plant to provide the energy. So yes, so we can learn efficiency. There are a lot of solutions. When we compare human brain versus digital computer, we can see how brain optimizes. For example, in brain, you have memory and processing in the same place, in contrary to computers where you have always RAM, some memory and processor separately. This is saving energy. There are a lot of things also. Maybe also that brain is not analyzing every data with the same importance, but it's very hierarchical approach. So there are a lot of things we can see in the human brain which show this extreme efficiency, and we can learn from this, and we can try to apply this in technology, which actually many people are trying to do.
Super fascinating. And does working with neurons change the moral conversation about AI consciousness?
I personally think no, but I'm not philosopher. I think this question is always open in the same way, because when we have intelligent system, it doesn't matter if it run on silicon or in living neurons. You have intelligent system, so you ask, oh, does it really feel something? Does it have some consciousness? If actually even today we can talk with the chat GPT in such a way that it's like a human. So many people are asking, or is it conscious maybe? So I think this depends on the level of intelligence, but that's my personal opinion. We actually reach out to experts because we have a lot of questions about consciousness, because people often associate living neurons or maybe brain and maybe are conscious. So we have a lot of questions like this, and we reach out to philosophers to encourage them to work on that. So we hope that soon we will get some answers from philosophers about this, how
Very
they see
cool.
consciousness of living computer, and is it different topic than digital.
Very, very cool. How do you personally define ethical computing?
Can you repeat?
How do you personally define ethical computing?
Ethical computing. Wow, I don't know. I think maybe with LLMs there is a big problem that LLMs are biased because they are built by mainly by men. So I heard such opinions that that LLMs is like a young man because it's built by young men. Most of the programmers are like that. So maybe it's not fully ethical if they will make decisions, for example. And there are more and more implementations currently that maybe in the future LLMs will decide whether you get a mortgage or I don't know, some important decisions. So maybe that's ethical computing would be that it will be balanced for everyone. So there are a lot of little questions, but I think also another topic which is important, which is often discussed by people who believe in general artificial intelligence, so that a computer will have like general intelligence like us. So many people talk about value alignment. I think this is important topic, even maybe more important than this bias, for male. That's maybe I don't see this as such a huge problem. I think bigger problem is alignment. So how to make sure that AI is in your favor?
Right.
because that's really something very important, because AI is becoming better and better, smarter than us. And how to do this that it will not harm us, because in many ways maybe it will be able in the future to harm humans. Actually, even now today we had cases where ChatGPT I had encouraged someone to commit suicide. So there are things already happening, but maybe in the future will be much more serious. And this is very important. And as far as I know, I'm not an expert engineer, but as far as I know from engineers, they don't know how to do this, how to make this alignment, that AI will be always on our side. I think this is the most important ethical problem.
I agree with you. That's so important. And thank you for sharing that and educating our
Mhm.
audience on this as well. On that, actually, what boundaries do you think founders must not cross, even in pursuit of innovation?
I think this is very individual for the technology, because there is such a variety of technologies that it's hard to make the rules. And actually, we know it because already because legislation, for example, always come behind the technology, because we have to first invent something and after think about the rules. And so I think you cannot say anything what will work for every case, but that's why it's important to collaborate, for example, with philosophers or ethics experts. I think it's important, and they have to think about technology case by case, actually, how it affects our lives, how it interacts with humans, and is it good for us or not. That's always important.
Great advice. Was there a point for you where you almost felt like, you're when you were in the transition from scientist to entrepreneur, where you almost felt like giving up?
Maybe giving up not, but I felt sometimes there is a lot of desperation, because you need sometimes to want something desperately, so that you put all energy in this. And it's not bad, actually, because when you are motivated, then you have better results. But giving up, I don't remember ever.
That's amazing. A great drive. And actually,
Mhm.
speaking of that, how do you stay grounded when you're, multitasking, juggling science, strategy, public speaking, like all these different hats as a leader?
Actually, I try to focus on one thing at a time and don't really believe in multitasking. And actually, I think it's very important to have time also to reset, to do nothing, to just maybe go for a walk and don't look at your phone. Or sometimes when I am in the gym, at the gym, that I am not looking constantly at the phone. I try. It's hard. But I think it's really important. Actually, I'm not fan of multitasking, but I think it depends on the personality. I think it's more effective when you focus on one thing at a time, and very important to not to overload. I think, like also some philosophers said, I think Harari said this, that now we have too many information. So in the past, for actually most of the humanity, we had a scarcity of information, so we had to like screen for everything we could find. But today it's the opposite. So today we have to actually close our heads and not to overload ourselves. We don't have to know everything. And I actually follow that way. It's very important for me. I live in a little bit of bubble. Sometimes my friends are making fun of me that I don't know some important things, but I think it's really necessary, because then you can focus on things where you have actually some impact, where you make a difference. And if I spend my time on following stuff which I cannot change anyway, but only I will use my mental power for that, so I try to avoid. So that's, at least I try, although it's hard not to get distracted.
Absolutely. You got to pick and choose your battles.
Yes.
Um, if you imagine the computing landscape in 2035, what does that look like?
So I believe that there will be many different processors, and I think this tendency, or is already this trend is already showing. So before we had only CPUs, after we had the GPUs, but we will have many different processors. I believe so. Also living neurons, but also quantum computing. I don't know if in 2035, but for sure in the future somewhere. And I think there will be a lot of hardware which will be optimized for specific tasks. And already scientists are doing a lot of work on this, because I think when we increase the volume of AI, then there will be a lot of things which a lot of applications when it will be reasonable to build specific hardware for some specific task if we will do a lot of this. So I believe that a lot of variety in hardware, and a lot of solutions for how to make it efficient, because I think that will be a huge bottleneck in the future. Maybe now we don't feel it yet, but in the future it might make AI not accessible for everyone if we will have not enough energy to cover all the processing.
Um, that is one of the biggest concern that we're not fully talking about and openly like disrupting. In terms of wetware, could that become mainstream in homes, hospitals, or industry?
Yes, definitely. But we believe in the bioprocessor, which will be central server. That's how we see the future. So the same way as today we have cloud computing, in the future you will be able to connect to the living neurons. And I definitely believe it will be great game changer, and it will take a significant part of the market because of this great competitive advantage that living neurons will be much cheaper to run because they use less energy than the digital hardware.
That's amazing insight. Evelina, you're such a legend, and there's so much abundance of deep tech knowledge that you're holding on to, and like such a diverse perspective as well. Our listeners would love to know, like, what legacy do you aim to leave for the next generation of women scientists and just like founders altogether?
Well, this is a big question. I think we all collectively, so it's not only about me, as humans, we try to make world the better place so that next generations will have easier life than we. So I think that's generally what we all should try to do.
Great advice, Gold. For scientists, investors, or founders listening, what kind of collaboration or ideas you're most excited to explore right now?
I'm very interested in neuromorphic computing. Neuromorphic computing is also inspired by living brain, but it's a little bit closer to application because biocomputers are very ambitious, so they will work maybe in 10 years. But we have already some little applications of neuromorphic computing, and this is computing which is done in silicon or analog chips, which are inspired by living brain. So that's a topic which is fascinating for me.
And for our listeners, how do they get in touch with you and book a collaboration session or learn more?
So definitely our website, finalspark.com, and LinkedIn, of course. We are very active on LinkedIn and we are always there.
Thank you so much, Evelina. That's it today for AI Unfiltered podcast.
Thank you so much.
We are so grateful to have Evelina